This computer. Sure, let us know that. Hey, everyone, welcome to the meetup this month. I'm Ethan. You don't know me. For those of you who do, I'm also Ethan. So we're going to talk tonight about how to break apart a monolith, how to approach it. Obviously, in the half an hour to an hour that we'll have together tonight, we're not going to be able to cover every aspect of breaking up a monolith, but we just want to get into an introduction to what is a monolith and then how you would go about breaking it up. That's what our objective for tonight. But as is the case, we like to make introductions and whatnot. Nadeem, I'll reserve you for last two so that you can speak. We can skip that part. Okay, all right. Well then, let's go to my left. We'll go around the room in here, and then we can go to the online folks in the order that you appear on my screen. So,
hello, I'm Connor. I'm a software developer here at LiveView.
My name is Scott Abbott. I am a developer at Wilson City.
My name is Brian Sorge, and I'm a developer here at LiveView.
Nadeem Nazir, I'm a manager here at LiveView.
Justin James, I'm a developer at LiveView.
Swapna Avla, I am a developer at LVT.
That's probably the better way. I should be saying LVT.
Troy Thomas,
I'm
I'm a developer at LiveView as well.
awesome. I'm Ethan. I also work at Wilson Cincinnati. Let's go online to Colred.
You guys work for the liveview.com? Is that where you work?
Stop.
Okay. My name's Casey and I work for Wilson Cincinnati.
Daniel. Daniel, do you want to introduce yourself? I hope I'm saying your name correctly.
Or Daniil.
You're on mute if you are trying to. We'll come back. Diego, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Diego, as you can see. I'm a developer at a Chilean company called Shifter.
Awesome. Welcome. One interruption from the introductions. Would an LVT employee be willing to go down and let someone in?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you, Justin. Welcome, Diego. Francesco.
Hi, I'm Francesco. I work at Higher Jane Technologies, and I'm the Eventide channel. And I've been fighting with the Zoom to get my webcam to work. Sorry.
Good luck with that, and welcome. Jerry.
Hi, I'm Jerry, and I work at LVT as well.
Welcome. Daniel said he has a noisy background. So neat. Who do we have left? Ramesh, would you like to say hello?
Hi all, this is Ramesh Bokpudi. I'm currently pursuing Masters in Information Systems.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you guys.
Yeah, good to have you. We're skipping that, so we can jump into this. Okay, let me share my screen. Let's see. I wish I had more visuals tonight than I do, but I don't, so we'll make do with what I have. Lucid chart. Here we go. Don't need to meet up windows open. And close that. All right, so breaking apart a monolith is a fun topic. It means so many different things. And where I've seen companies typically arrive at this point, they're going along, things are going mostly well for the business, and they reach a point where they're not shipping as fast as they used to, and they would like to ship faster. What company doesn't want to ship faster, of course? And so you go out to the literature and you break it up into microservices. Actually, let me grab, I'm going to pause the share. Now if I open another window here. Oh, hey, we have more people. We can have everyone introduce themselves.
Outside.
Oh,
We're
sorry
building
about
apparently
that.
Titan security after 6 and we didn't know that. Stacking on the door.
I'm just pulling up some different sites that would be helpful for this.
You can pull up to the table.
Yeah, well, yeah, doing this.
Crowd anybody?
There's something here.
Right, let me grab these. All right, I'll restart the share here. Before I do though, let me just cancel sharing. Stop share. There we go. New people who join, want to introduce yourselves. Start with you.
I'm Derek Mackay. I'm a microservice developer at a company called Explogix, and I just wanted to get back into the community and start listening.
Awesome, welcome Derek. And then do
Michael Borgolthas, work at Fusaware, do automotive SaaS software.
Right on. Welcome, Michael. And then did we have users?
Me. I'm Tyler Slater, CTO at Parallel. We're a new startup, so hopefully don't have to run into microservice split ups too soon, but I'll learn a little bit more.
Right on. Cool. Welcome, folks. And something about memes came up. Let me turn focus on.
We have some pizza in the kitchen if you guys.
Okay, I pointed him to it there. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna restart the share here. So yes, companies aren't shipping like they used to, and they want to break things up into microservices. And depending on the wave and the swing of the pendulum in the tech world, that will be met with either it's a good idea or it's a bad idea. I think right now the trend is to kind of say microservices are a bad idea. And then given as examples of that, failures to use AWS Lambda correctly, which I don't think reflects anything on microservices. Anyway, thank you for coming to my TED Talk for the next 3 minutes. I do want to say that I have yet to be at a company that said we want to do microservices where that was actually the thing holding them back from their goals. I don't know, has anyone here read the DevOps handbook 16 times? It hasn't been that many for me, but one of the things they talk about a lot is like, we want to achieve this goal where small independent teams can work safely and autonomously. And microservices are a way to make it so that your code base isn't what's preventing that. But there are a whole lot of other reasons that could prevent that as well. And so the truth of the situation is that whatever your architecture is a reflection of your company and the way that it operates. If you've heard of Conway's Law, Mel Conway wrote, I'll try to recite this correctly, that systems that or organizations that design systems are destined to produce systems that reflect the communication structure of their organization. That is sometimes misquoted as you ship your org chart or you ship your team structure, but it's the communication structure that matters, because you can put the org in the correct structure, but if within the teams people still keep the old communication structure going, you won't fix that. So if you don't have teams aligned towards customer value, if you don't have proper technical practices and all of that, those will also hold you back from shipping regularly and independently. Provided you have that taken care of, and now you're faced with the technical challenges, that's where we enter the picture with what we're talking about here tonight. What we talk about here tonight cannot fix broader pathology in an organization. Only serious soul searching can do that, and perhaps sacrificing some gerbils. I don't know, I haven't tried that one yet, but anyway, all right, so jumping back into the tech here. You have to understand what is a monolith. It's not a deployment strategy. It's not whether or not you use Docker. It's not whether or not you have microservices and Go or whatever. It's not a technology thing. It's a data model. And so here is an example of a monolith. Maybe I should make this bigger here.
Screenshot's not going to do it justice. You can actually open it.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's why I have the link here. So, okay, I used to work at Instructure, and I'm very grateful to them for that. Wait a second. Oh, did I? Wow, how many years have I been using this slide and the link is to the wrong file? That's pretty impressive. Okay, I've never claimed I'm perfect. I'm just saying that this file is a total. they open sourced their project and it was great. And this is just what you get in traditional MVC stuff, but this is the user class. Oh, that's why it links to that file. Right, no, that was intentional. Let's go back to the screenshot just real
That's when they
quick.
first started adding to the user and they're like, what is every possible thing that you'd want to know about the user?
Yeah, exactly. This is the users table, all of its columns. And it leads to this great file here. We'll get to the bottom of it eventually.
Metaphorically or.
Little bit of both, little bit of both. Yeah.
Model your models after this model.
Yeah, 3,437 lines of code in it. It's not all because of comments and white space. And Francesco, you say familiar with this? Yeah, Scott Bellware, Nathan Ladd used this file in a talk they gave in Denver. I think it was a few years ago. This is a monolith. And the reason it's a monolith is because here's something a guy named Dahan said. He's a smart guy. He, I think he owns particular software. They make end service bus and he does a distributed systems training. But he was saying the problem with the monolith is that there aren't proper boundaries here. And so he talks about how to find what those boundaries are supposed to be. He says, focus on the attributes. Actually, would someone else like to read this so we can have a moment of reprieve? Go ahead, Justin.
Focus on the attributes. That's actually where the greatest leverage comes from. You pick up two fields, two attributes with a given noun, and you ask, do both of these attributes need to exist in one transaction? For example, say the customer's name and the discount. Will I need to operate on the customer's name and the customer's discount level in a single transaction? And one of the ways to try to answer that question is to try to frame it in the form of a requirement. For example, if the customer's name has more than 7 characters, they cannot get more than a 7% discount. Udi Dahan.
Yeah, I think that link actually goes to the timestamp in the video when he says that. I'm just going to check real quick to make sure no one else is trying to get in here. No, we're not. Okay, great. Yeah, so obviously that's an absurd requirement. Just because you can phrase an absurd one doesn't mean there isn't a valid one. We're having audio problems. Where are the microphones in here?
That one and then on the front and back.
And they're really sensitive.
When I talk like this?
No,
okay.
You can hear whispers. What audio problems are they complaining of?
Francesco said he's hearing it very robotic sometimes, and Casey said it cuts in and out on his phone. But okay, hopefully it gets better, stabilizes. In the context of the video, he was saying when we go to do analysis, there's the like objects are nouns and methods are verbs. And he says that's totally the wrong way to think about it. Focus on the specific data attributes. And so with that example from Instructure, okay, Jerry's saying it sounds good to him. With the example from Instructure, I took the time zone and the storage quota. And it's like, can we form a requirement out of there? Being inspired by Udi, if your time zone is UTC -7, then you can't store more than 7 gigabytes in the system. That makes sense, right? And so the thing to take away here, like here you go, here's a Venn diagram for it. No overlap.
Beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Like what operation needs to know both of those things with transactional consistency? I'm not sure how we could come up with one.
You don't like people on the East Coast, so you decrease their storage quota.
That's a valid requirement. I don't know if Canvas has that requirement.
I hope not.
So yes, that's the essence of it. And so like the hardest part of the whole not building a monolith or breaking away from it is accepting that just because two pieces of data share a common primary key, it doesn't mean that they're actually part of the same thing. Because we want to focus on processes, workflows, business processes, that kind of a thing, not these data objects. And it's the focusing on these data entities that leads to having the monolith, because behavior congregates with the data it uses. Oh, I'll show this for old time's sake. Here's exactly how an MVC project becomes a big blown monolith. In this game, there is the white circle that you play that, and then you need to touch the ones that are smaller than you. So like you start out as user, you've got a first name, a last name, maybe a username and password. And then what in the system doesn't involve knowing who the user is, and then the following happens. Boom, that's how you end up with the user class like instructions. That's exactly how it happens. Anyway, it's not a deployment strategy. So if you've got this tangled mess all in one process, what would we call these lines that connect different modules running in the same process?
Say that one more time.
When one thing in a program calls something else in the same program, function calls I'm going for, that's all right. Let's play guess the word that's in my mind.
You're on the thing too.
A function call?
Oh, I guess.
There's just two on the nose though.
That's yeah. It can't be that. No, it can't.
Because it was there, I didn't want to guess that.
Yeah, exactly. No, that makes sense. So, hey, Mark, did we skip introducing you?
Yes.
We did. I'm sorry, Mark. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Mark Pfister, and I'm a king of the nerds.
Nice. Welcome. Sorry for missing you. I just went around the table and assumed everybody had. My bad. Sorry. Okay, so you go to the blogosphere and they're like, extract microservices, blah, 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 blah. But you haven't changed anything except now you have HTTP calls.
Network latency.
Yeah. And we know that networks are always reliable. So it's completely safe. But yeah, no, you get the problems of a distributed system and a monolith at the same time. So why harp on that? One, I had some slides for it, but two, just to really drive home, it's the data model that we have to fix. If you don't address that underlying data model, then it really doesn't matter what technology you sprinkle in there, you're going to end up with all the same pain points. And so what we're going to do tonight is take a very simple example of a table you might see in an e-commerce project, for example. So why don't I give this a label? I'll make it plural because why not? No, it's not. Let's buck all the trends here. Let's call it the product table, although I think it's products in the code because I used Rails. And this particular example, I am being inspired by the Eventide training to come up with this particular one. But here we can look at these data points for a product. We have the title, the description, the quantity, and the price. And the question is, which of these need to have transactional consistency with one another? Does the price care about the description of the product or vice versa? Is there some requirement that relates description and price together in real time? Or price and title, or quantity and description? I can't think of one. So if you were to take their training, they would say, we actually have 3 separate domains in there. We can lump title and description together. That makes sense. You want to make sure you're describing the right thing. That's like the catalog domain or something. Listing out what are all of the products that you have. That was actually supposed to connect to this box. Which one? Good enough, whatever. You could have the product inventory. And I should probably put product in front of that. And then the product pricing domain is represented in there. Now you could in a system theoretically have a requirement between quantity and price. If you want to do like Uber's surge pricing, which is a sound economic principle, as we get less of something, we raise the price of it to make sure some is still available. We will not have that requirement tonight, but that's a non absurd requirement that you might have in your system. But for the normal operation here, it's like, what would change my quantity when I ship something, when new product arrives? what does any of that have to do with the price of the thing?
Would you err on the side of keeping things more consolidated until you're certain that there's not the relationship?
I wouldn't. I think the burden of proof is on consolidating the things. Because I think it's a lot easier to combine things than to split them apart.
I would think even with this, I would split it down even more, because like thinking about Amazon and the way they design their pages with title and description, it's not just a title and description anymore. They've added so much more to it.
That's true.
That they be almost stuck to like, well, we have this legacy notion of description. Do we break that into its own separate thing? Or now that we've got product specs and when it was added and things, do we keep adding that to this product catalog, or does that start becoming its own thing? So almost looking at like how the UI might grow independently as title and information about it. It's so much easier to then almost reduce those than it is to try to break them apart later. At least that's been the pain point we've seen.
That is totally fair. And on Amazon today, the titles are basically descriptions so that they can win at the SEO game. Ryan George captured that in a video if you've ever watched that one. I'll have to post a link to that on the meetup page. It's brilliant. But yeah, no, exactly. Now the disappointing part for the meetup tonight is like literally that 3-minute conversation we had right now. That's the whole process of breaking up the monolith, is doing this analysis. And it is hard. It is really hard. So very hard. It takes a lot of careful consideration. If you're starting from greenfield and trying to get this right from the get-go, it is also hard. But if you're starting from a monolith and trying to break out these different concepts, I think it's even harder. Because now you also have to, what do we do with the data that was already in the big massive table? I'm leaving that part as an exercise for the reader, but just trying to introduce the concept of what a monolith is, and then what is the analysis process that helps you get the correct boundaries. These boundaries would map to microservices if you were going to use microservices to represent them. But what we're going to do tonight is we're going to start with the difference between third normal form and monolith then. Oh, third normal form. Remind me the definition of that one. I think something could be in third normal form, I think, but still not be the right boundaries for a microservice. The third normal form just means that, let me look it up here.
I think what you said is correct. It's a trick question in this case. I think there is more to a monolith, because otherwise, based on the current definition on the slides, there is a step that's missing to define a monolith, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Still,
we can continue there.
For you to search the third normal form and read it to us.
Okay, let's do that.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, and I don't know if it could be summarized and
no. Like the summary is you should put in a table only the attributes that belong to the table and the primary key. Like that's a very rough idea of the summary. It's way more precise.
Yeah.
Let's continue. Sorry, I didn't want to diverge too much.
Okay, no, it's a fair question, because this thing was in third normal form when it was the big products table, I think, because we don't have duplicated data. You would expect to not have the same title or description between products. So
I see your point. Okay.
So it's not enough to be third normal form. We also, and it's not enough, like you couldn't just atomize every column and just give it its own table. You need to have the things that do have the transactional consistency requirement between them and nothing else. And that's the part.
Third normal form on steroids.
I would say that like third normal form has to do with like the repetition of data and like how it's stored relationally, but like whether or not it's monolithic or not has more to do with the business domain and the applications of the data. Does that ring true to anyone else?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a good case.
Okay. Awesome. So that's how you break apart a monolith. We can look at an example of doing that. So let's do that. Is that big enough text?
Yes.
Casey, you're on your phone. You can see a couple characters on the screen at once right now.
I see blue and white. Yep.
Nice, okay. If you scroll up, you can see some purple.
No, it's all right.
Okay.
I'm only half watching. Sorry. I'll watch the VOD later, I guess.
Don't admit that while we're all on the line.
I mean, I'm actively participating in stuff.
All right, so here's a products table, has a title, description, quantity, and price. It's all a monolith. Right now, if we start our Rails server, bring up a browser, we can go to localhost 3030. Come on, son. And not that either. There we go. We just built this with Rails' scaffolding. So like this design here, I didn't come up with that. Not that I'd come up with better, but I didn't come up with this one. We can make a new product and be like the Wasus gaming chair lumbar support. It's a chair. So we have 10 of them in stock and they cost $1.23. Neat, we have a product, right? Great interface, but it's in this monolithic table structure. Did we get a message?
That was me.
Oh, okay. I won't put it up on the screen then.
It's okay, it wasn't embarrassing.
Okay. Okay, so what would be the first step in breaking this apart? It's a dumb question because we just had it up on the screen.
Yeah.
You need to break your table into.
Yeah. So this is like a possible migration path if you actually had a table. And it will eventually get us to microservices in October, maybe. But we won't have any components tonight, but we'll be ready to finally extract them at the end of the night. But I learned a thing or two about myself over the years, and that is I don't type very well in front of people. So, no, it doesn't autocomplete, does it? What? Oh, see, can't even type the name of, what is that word? Separate interfaces, there we go. Okay, great. This file is still as it was, but we've introduced some more tables. I called them entries, the catalog domain one, because they were entries for a product. We have an inventories table and a prices table, so we can look at those. Zoom controls are always where you don't want them to be. Anyway, so this just has the quantity. It'll have the product ID as its primary key, and I guess it has the timestamps as well. And that's okay to have one column in a thing. That's the only data it manages. Entries has the title and the description. Prices has a price for it. Stored as a string because I don't trust floats for money things.
I think this is that third normal form where it's basically you use the primary key of like the product so that they're unique and you only have one.
Yeah, all of your tables will be in third normal form.
I don't.
And the last one was too, but
I don't think that's quite right because we could have different products with the same price. And in third normal form, you would
consolidate that.
You'd have a table that's like price ID. So like the product would be assembled from having IDs to the more atomic elements. And we're not even going to have that aggregated table.
That sounds like a nightmare to maintain. And like you have to figure out which things have the same price and then kind of consolidate it through a third table.
Yeah, that's normal form for you. It saves on space a lot.
I guess that was a big deal at one point.
Yeah, space is infinite and free now.
Yeah, close enough in the business mindset.
Anyway, yeah, so we got that. So let's go ahead and restart the Rails server. I don't think I did any data migration. So if I reload the page here, what do we get? Oh, got to run the migrations. Rails DB migrate. And that'll get rid of all my data, right? Sorry, I was looking at a particular product and we just deleted them all. So, wait, Ethan, this interface looks exactly the same. It is. And watch this. Type Wait says chair. It's a chair. We could have 10 of them, same price. Hit create product. Oh, look at that. It looks all the same, right? What do you suppose I did under the hood?
Split it up.
I did, but how did I give that interface? Because let's go to the database here. Look, there's a product inventories entry, a product prices entry. I don't remember which one I didn't say, but look, there are all three of them there. How can you, what is this magic? By which you could write to different tables all at the same time and have guarantees that they're all in sync. Yeah, exactly. So don't look at this code ever because it'll corrupt your mind. But I think I put it in models. Yeah, I made a product model. This uses a Rails thing called active model, which active record, the ORM also uses, but it gives you a lot of the same interface. I'm not proud of this. I'm not saying ship this in production, but what I was able to do with it is still have this notion of a product here. So like if we go back to the index page here, let's go back to products. It shows up. In that controller action, I have products.all, which calls product.all, which is not on the screen anymore. At models product. I had to implement all because it's not active record anymore, so it didn't have it. So I just wrote a query that joins the things together. And then for saving them, it was kind of the same thing. Somewhere in here, where you can update them and save them. I promised everyone this would be a whelming presentation, but like create, we do, it looks a lot the same. There was some weird stuff to get the various parameters out of the form.
So when you create the model and it's across 3 tables, does your active model manage the transactions for you and you can treat them as if they're one thing?
Active model itself does not, but the one that I wrote does. Like you won't get it out of the box. I had to type that in.
Show that.
It's right here. So when we save it, I do have actual active record objects here. We enter the inventory and the price. We can look at the price real quick.
You can use active record that way though, where you can basically have it create those for you. But it's a lot of black magic that's tricky.
Black magic generally is. So when this containing model gets saved, it creates instances of the active record objects for the various domains, opens the transaction and then saves them all within the transaction. So, if it fails, they all fail. Why I like this as an incremental step, though, the general concept, if not the particular implementation, is there is no change to the users in this interface. Like they're still seeing all the same stuff. I believe it's the exact same view file that the scaffolding generated, but I just changed how the model was implemented. But now that we have these into separate tables, the next step that I would have done would have been to now start separating the interfaces, because since they are different business domains, different processes, they could be separate applications or not.
Let me push for a second. And
Yeah.
hopefully you have a good answer. Say someone had a table that was as wide as maybe 70 columns.
Hypothetical.
Yeah, hypothetically.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy.
And you broke it into, some of your tables have essentially an ID and a single column. You broke it into, say, let's just go conservative, 40 tables, 40 or 50 tables. And then you want to provide the same user experience in the interface, and you're joining 40 or 50 tables to provide the same user experience. Are you going to run into performance issues with your database at this point?
You might, and it could be slower for a spell. but there are some other ways to do it. I've got some in my mind. This is not a ploy to be like, I don't have an answer. Maybe hopefully someone else does, but I also don't want to do all the talking. But how might you, what other options could a database give you to prevent that?
Yes, Connor.
If you use Postgres and you use prepared statements, then it helps optimize it when you have a lot of joins like that, where it kind of creates its own virtual table when it's actually doing that select, and it runs way faster. I think new versions of InnoDB run that as well.
Okay.
So it's almost negligible to do that. There's almost a bigger performance impact of doing a row scan over a really, really long like table than it is to do a join.
Let's say you were using MySQL.
Don't
answer that.
Yeah.
A view might work as well.
Yeah, materialized view.
Okay.
You can just
So
generate.
you're saying with prepared statements, Postgres actually stores them almost as if a view, but only for its own performance reasons.
Exactly. And if you don't believe that too, you can use a lot of databases. MySQL does generated columns. So if any of their dependent tables change, then it will regenerate that and put that in the table. So you can read it. And same thing with views. Views have the same notion of a generated data set. So it'll watch for those.
Okay, so you might split the tables if you're in MySQL and create a view. Postgres could help you optimize for you. And then from the view, then your user experience could remain the same while you're doing the preliminary work to split, to boundary the tables.
And if you had that view table in place, if you did eventually turn it into Eventide components, well, guess what? Your view data table basically already know its structure, and then you can build that.
Okay.
Yeah, the materialized view is the one that I was going to say. If that is almost exactly like a view data table, except Postgres actually writes data somewhere as the source tables are changing. It is updating something that's actually written to disk and is queryable like a table.
It's super neat. It's just like if anything.
Statement storage thing. You're talking about the prepared statement thing?
This is different. Materialized views are basically, because when you create a view and you define how you want that view to be constructed, it's smart enough to know if anything in that data set were to change, it basically runs that query for you and then saves it into that materialized view so that there's no penalty of then having to do a query against those other tables.
It would slow your writes down.
Yeah,
a little
but
bit, so
it's gotten so good at doing writes now that we're doing reads way more than writes. But that, like the quantity side of it, that's where having the quantity table is super helpful, because you might be updating your quantity a ton, like maybe 100 times a second if you're really selling through something. And if you're doing that on your main products table, then if you materialize anything off of your products table, everything is going to have an impact from that. But if you just have it in a quantity table, you can even pull that out and throw it into Redis and not have all of these other implications with that.
Materialized view in Postgres, it's not eventually consistent. It's
right. It is.
It's immediate.
It's an ACID compliant thing.
Right.
Yeah, that's why it slows the writes down, because it has to make sure that update occurs as well. Yeah, yeah. You asked a question. Any other questions? Like,
If you had a high write table database, then you did a lot more writes than reads. Would that still be a good option for that?
oh, I'm going to say I don't know, and that would take analysis, but it is a fair question.
If you are okay with it being eventually consistent, there's some things you can do with Postgres where you basically say it won't lock things. So you may do a read even though you've already issued the write, and it won't lock that table. So someone could read it and get the old value. But if it's like a page refresh and you don't really care, then you can get multi-core concurrent writes and not lock your whole database doing that.
Cool. Good questions. Any others? Remember at this question. Okay, this is the hand wavy part. So like the next step I do, I might pull these into separate applications. But now, if I wanted to pull out microservices, if there was some reason why I wanted the quantity to be controlled by an autonomous component, which for you newcomers, that might not mean a whole lot to you right now, but trying to think how much detail to go into on that.
I do have a question, but it might be for a future discussion. And maybe that's what you're just hinting at. you've got a single user interface to do multiple business processes. Like when you ask someone to create a product, you're placing on them the requirement that they know the quantity and the title and it seems like that would be much more work to discover the correct user flow. I mean, you've divided up the data because you know about the transactional consistency, but now you've run into this human problem of, I'm thinking out loud at the same time, but it's like, what do you do first? Because you have an ID for a product in 3 different tables now. What's the first step in creating a product? Do you have a table that's just an identifier table that links them together that they must all relate to in a relational model? Or are they all equally owners of their identity and you could start at any one of the 3 tables to generate a product?
We glossed over it, this part here that took us from this to this. What you described to me is part of how I know which columns have transactional consistency needs with each other and which don't. The way that I imagine this, if I had broken it out, it would have started with the entry and then those would, like you would then finally have a product ID and I might in the user interface show the title and description as non-editable fields to punch in the quantity or to punch in the price. But I don't believe that the process, let's go back to the instructure example here. I don't believe the process would be pull up this file, look at it and start thinking which of these needs it. It would be going and doing the research, the product level research to figuring out what are the actual flows through this thing that we have.
Business and the customers.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. I'm really glad you asked that question because otherwise it might have been as simple as, oh, you just look at the database table and figure it out. But no, it's, you didn't do that due diligence in the first place. And now we're saying, okay, the only way we can get this separated out, right, is to go back and make up for that deficit and do it now.
So before you're making any technical changes to your tables, you're doing the human work first.
Yes, I would always say that, yeah. Maybe not, I don't know. Yes, probably. It's probable that that might be the right way to do it. No, that's how I would approach it, absent other information. So.
That's the hardest part. We're doing some of that online.
Yes.
And it, like you said, with your 3-minute TED talk, if other things aren't aligned, it's challenging,
right?
To say the least.
You don't have a technology problem at that point. Brian, you raised your hand a second ago.
I think what I was gonna say was already, you guys got kind of followed up with it, so.
Okay.
I was just gonna talk about pulling the different pieces into different business processes. When you're talking about, well, where do they start? You know, that's what you do with the humans in the business is like, okay, when you create a product, you know, let's just ignore what we have right now, but what do you need bare minimum? Probably just a name, right? And then later on, you can add other business processes like, okay, well then manufacturing needs to know how much quantity is on hand and so that we can order more and do, you know, whatever. And then in addition to that, we need to know the price that we're going to sell to and, you know, oh, and where do we set discounts? And like, these are all different business processes that happen, but they don't all happen at once. And I think you guys were talking about like, yeah, you do all that first and that's how you pull the.
Yeah. A little more on the technical side though, can you switch back to the slide with the table breakup?
Yeah.
Which I guess isn't a slide. This right here, there are going to be 3 tables and they will all have a product ID. Relationally in your database, is one of them like the master product table to which the others have foreign key relationships?
The way that I implemented them, no.
But should you, or why not? For example, if you wanted to eliminate a product in a delete, and I know you can have table relationships that you can cascade a delete. That would only work if one of them was like the master table.
Yeah.
Is this a good a good thing to be saying out loud, or is this like, no, that should not be, there's not a master product table, they're all peers, they have an ID, synchronizing the identifier and making sure that the other tables are up to date is not a thing that the database should be managing through cascade rules, but what's your?
I'd probably say something along those lines. In the training, when Scott and Nathan introduced this, the point that they get to is that the design flaw was thinking there was the products table. It's an aggregate concept. There are no products in the system. There are product catalog entries, there are product inventories and product prices.
And what we've built so far, there isn't like a master system of this is the primary product identifier. They're all peers to each other, right? More or less.
Question is whether you need referential integrity or not.
And so the worst case that could happen, like take it the way that I was imagining it, suppose that these started as the product catalog or the product entries. As why don't I change this?
Well, in this case, you do need referential integrity because you're going to pull up a page where you list both the title and description and the price for the customer.
But that's not clear. You could probably create a product with absolutely no quantity because you haven't purchased anything yet.
The quantity, the price, the title, description.
And same with the price. You haven't determined what the price is. You know what the name of it is.
This
You don't
happens.
know how much you're going to sell
But
it for.
eventually, when the user sits down to browse the catalog, they'll want to see the price. And at that point, you need referential integrity.
We could guard against that and just not display any products that don't have an inventory or price.
Okay.
We probably don't show the inventory to the customer. We'll lie about it. We'll say there are only 4 left, so you better hurry
Or
up.
if it's a thing that doesn't have a price anymore.
This would happen.
See the item.
Yeah.
This might happen in like a manufacturing scenario too, where you're creating like a new item and you're gonna scan in the barcode. It doesn't even have a serial number yet, right? So it's just an ID, and then you scan in the barcode and pass it along as like an item or whatever.
Francesca,
I was gonna say that someone who's done e-commerce and stuff a lot, you'd be surprised how like split up things are, and then like it's like sometimes the pricing is based off like the shipment that you got in of a certain like sub product and the cost of the goods sold and all this crap. Like there's so much that can go into it, to where like if you look at it overly simple, sure, yeah, you want to see this, that, and the other, but sometimes, you know, they want you to show the product, but then have like the manufacturer requires that they have to like request the price, and like there's just so much crap. Like yeah, anyway.
That's true.
There's
And
a lot
on Amazon today, I looked
lot
up
of
the
nuance.
product and it wasn't in stock or maybe even manufactured anymore, and there was no price, but I could still look at the product.
what we're saying is like, we are declaring these as truly independent
Yeah.
processes. And it would be weird to do a quantity and a price. I think that didn't previously have a description. Like that might be hard to figure out after the fact.
Yeah.
And so we can have our internal process be, we get a title and a description, that's also solidifying an ID. And then some other interfaces are able to observe, oh, hey, this product exists, we don't have a price for it, and then do the necessary work to figure it out.
Sure, in this particular example, but in other cases, maybe there would be an entryway to generate an entity through not just one route, but maybe more than one route.
It's possible, yeah.
Right, you'd never make a price without the name.
The trap is still thinking of it as a single product, right? That has all of these things that are just spread out. The truth is, when you isolate it as individual processes, the product for that process is that process's product. So it's an individual concept to that process. It's more coincidence that the business requires that all these things align up properly to display the page or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're isolating the data in this way, you should really think of it as truly isolated. It is intended for that process. You have that ID just to say that it is that thing. for tracking purposes or whatever, or diagnostics. But yeah, it's a trap to think that because those two processes share the same product ID, that they are supposed to be the same thing.
Yeah.
In fact, like manufacturing or shipping often just refers to them as SKUs, and some products are actually multiple SKUs. Like, so like selling on the front end, a product might be a conglomerate of SKUs, but from a manufacturing's perspective, it's just, I've got this many SKUs, or, you know, shipping and manufacturing type stuff. Like, I've got this many SKUs. I need to make sure I have X coming in, and because, you know, Y is going, you know, out and all this stuff, right? They just see it as SKUs. They don't necessarily care that the SKUs are bundled together, other than how it affects their shipping, right? You know what I mean?
Ethan, so I sent you an example of something that I was just like poking around with. I essentially have one table that exists to generate the ID that I then use, and all the other tables actually care about the content. So I have like a post table in my Facebook clone, whatever, that has a post and ID that things like the comments, the likes, those things reference that ID that was generated by the database. And that's like its one purpose as a table, so that they have that something
That's what I was
the ID.
describing, yeah.
Because I mean, if we have it this other way, it's like, what is then creating the ID that's then used for all those subsequent tables?
That was my question.
Tie them together.
That was my question.
Fair question.
Do I create it in one and then I'm like, okay, the rest now should use this, or?
That's what I was thinking. So in a business process like this, I'm imagining e-commerce. I haven't worked in e-commerce before, but if I were doing it, I would think that the product catalog stuff would come first. We're like, oh, we're going to sell this new item. Let's type that up. Let's hit save, ID generated, record in the database. Without getting into the event sourcing side of it, then in my quantity and price applications, maybe I have a dashboard or something that's like, hey, we have an entry that doesn't have a quantity to it. So then, oh, I'm in charge of managing the inventory. So I'm going to do whatever I do to need to get it a price. But I'm saying that the catalog was authoritative over the identifiers. And my interface probably wouldn't have a way to just willy-nilly add a quantity to the system. But even if it did, like to Mark's point, it wouldn't necessarily be harmful, because I'm not going to just get naked quantities and put them on the screen. So I don't know that I would digest this fast enough here looking at it on my phone, but I don't necessarily see the necessity for such a table, but I'm also not willing to say never do that.
Okay. Can you show us your table definitions again?
I can. Yeah. How do I show them all at once? And yeah, DB migrate. There's the inventory.
Well, let's look at the quantity.
So it's a quantity. Oh my goodness. No, that's inventories.
The primary key is the product ID, and a primary key in Postgres is auto incrementing, right?
Not necessarily.
No?
Yeah. Yeah, you have to tell it to.
This ID is different.
Okay, because you wouldn't be able to rely upon auto incrementing ID in your subsequent tables, because they need to have the ID of the previous process.
You can use a UID as a primary key in Postgres.
Yeah, but that leans towards what you're saying. You can't create the other two without having created the first one, right?
Why don't they just need to agree on an ID essentially? It doesn't need to exist. You can make up the ID. Like, I was picturing a different business process. Let's say you have a catalog team, like an actual team of people, and you have a content team. I apologize. And then you have a catalog team. The catalog team is taking care of deciding the price of your products, and the content team is taking care of inserting titles and descriptions in each product. They could work at a completely different pace. The only thing they need to agree on is what a SKU actually means. So, hey, a SKU is actually, I don't know, this cogwheel or whatever you're trying to produce. And then they can work at a completely different pace. So you cannot have a foreign key in this case. So the two tables are completely disjoint from the database perspective. They will insert all the price in one of the table, have the same product ID, which could be the SKU itself. And on the other table, the product table, you could have, or the product catalog table, or what you want to call. The ID would be still the SKU, and you would have just title and description. They work completely different time. You might not have data on one side or the other, but at some point they will line up just because they all have the same SKU.
It's part of the human discovery, right? Like, what is our business process going to be?
Yeah, exactly. It's good to keep in mind that like we live in a temporal limited world and things happen in an order. You'll likely have the catalog entry first because of your business process, but it's almost a coincidence when it comes to the other processes getting their IDs. They could theoretically be started out of order as long as they're all referring to the same thing properly, then it's okay.
And Francesco, if I'm understanding the key insight you made there is that your database table's primary key is not necessarily the identifier you're using with your customers. In fact, that was generally not how things were done until Rails came on the scene. And then everyone's like, oh, just use the primary keys as the customer visible identifier. But what you're saying is, no. In e-commerce, we work with SKUs. Who cares if your table calls ID 1 SKU 5 and his calls ID 2 SKU 5? We care about the SKU. So long as we're agreed on the SKU, who cares what our primary keys in our tables are?
Well, that's why I like to have two. Like I have a 64-bit primary key, and then I'll sometimes have the actual important primary key, like the SKU that needs to be unique, because it's faster to do joins and stuff against that than to have like even a UID, because the processor struggles with anything longer than 8 bits or 8 bytes.
Yeah.
But that notion still exists. Like you don't make the primary key the thing that like the customer would see and also key to your logic and flow.
In the case of a social media, you'd never have comments on a post without a post.
Yeah.
But with a retailer, you might be manufacturing and getting your own merchandise into your site in a very specific order. But you might sell things for somebody else, and they might show up with a box of 10,000 SKUs, and they're going to fill out the catalog page later.
Well, and
So
this was an interesting thing I ran into while working on my social media clone, which is when Facebook decided that when you delete a post, it doesn't actually delete it because they need it for like auditing purposes. What did they do? Did they add another column that's called user thought it was deleted, or did they change how it was like internally tagged? So instead of needing to modify that table, maybe there's just the notion of when it was made visible to users in a separate table that references that. And that's what I use to control. In that case, I could have that as a separate component or piece of logic that was when this post is revoked, and I'm not needing to go in and change what could be a very complex table if I add all of these extra columns to it. And so what was interesting is to see is as I added more of these advanced business cases, it became more practical to then have these split ups because logic or the view almost just kind of materialized out of, well, if I just remove this row, then I get the behavior I want. I don't need to add another piece of conditional logic.
Someone brought a box of SKUs. I hope you have a good SKU driver. Sorry.
Oh, Ethan, that was a good one.
You ever work on Magento? Sounds like a Magento pun.
No, I didn't.
A good SKU driver.
Okay.
How dare you bring up Magento?
I know, PTSD, I'm sorry.
Isn't that the bad guy in the
Blue's Clues reference.
A Blue's Clues reference? Okay. That's a fun show. Okay, so that's all I got. So to summarize, the key takeaways here are, it is your data model that determines if you have a monolith or not. And the controversial thing I would say is, or the one that like was like a 2x4 in the head to me that is still struggle to break free of, is just because two pieces of data could be represented with the same primary key, that doesn't mean that they're actually pieces of data pertaining to the same thing, because we don't care about the data aggregations if we want small teams to be able to work safely and independently of one another. We care about processes and aligning to business processes, not groupings of data. That makes sense. And I really think that's the core of it. So armed with those two principles, then you can approach your monolith. You've got a monolith you didn't do. That might be too say. There's a good chance you didn't do the necessary business analysis to really understand all the use cases, especially if you have interfaces that are like, go here to create a user and to edit it, where like you're trying to do a process and you have to go to 7 different screens to edit all the data into the correct way. That would reveal an interface that is designed along these database entities rather than what the user is actually trying to do. So it is hard to recover from a monolith. And it's hard to build a business case for recovering from a monolith because I forget who said it, and I'll badly paraphrase it, but the biggest impediment to innovation is a successful business. Like I worked at a company that was pulling in like $10 billion a year. It's like, why would we change anything? We're pulling 10 billion a year. Well, because your competitors are going to change it one day, and if you don't, you'll become irrelevant. Nah, we're making $10 billion a year. Why would that happen?
Private equity is going to buy us. They don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all going great until suddenly it isn't. And maybe it's not sudden, maybe it's a dwindling thing. But it all comes down to the same principles of keep things that change together, keep together things that change together, and don't keep together things that don't change together. And that one principle is like all of software design wrapped up in one sentence. Simple, but not easy.
Not easy.
Not easy. That's all I got. But pointing out too that this would have been last month if we had had it, but this meetup has been going for a year now. So thank you to LVT for hosting us yet again and for the delicious pizza. And thanks everybody for coming. I'm gonna, unless anyone online has any further question or comment, I don't mean to forget you folks.
I could chat for an hour about the topic, but I think that's going to be too long.
Awesome.
The Cliff Notes version of it.
Yeah, if you've got something to say, Francesco, let's hear it.
I literally have 3 or 4 very long philosophical thoughts about this in mind, so I'm not sure if I'm going to make a summary.
Well, here's a good question. Could you do it at a future meetup?
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Because if you've had this, 3 times, and I don't think we answered all of the questions, but it'd be kind of fun to go over this more.
Okay, yeah, it is possible. I need to figure out some time to put together some notes.
Okay.
The most challenging part.
On that note, I believe next month's is covered as well as the month after that. So the next open slot is October. Spooky month.
Are the next 2 follow-ups to breaking up a monolith?
We're not. We've got one on controls, not UI controls, but like example data test controls. And then a follow-up on taking that concept even further. So one from Antoine, who's been here before. He'll be remote for because he lives in Texas, which you can tell from his accent when he speaks. He's French.
And lives in
French Texas. Yeah, he's an awesome guy. And then a guy named Colred is supposed to present in September.
Who's that weirdo?
I don't know, but we'll make sure not to let him in here. And then October then is the next currently unscheduled month. So there would be a lot of time and we could chat more in the Eventide Slack, Francesco, if you want to. But there are no sweeter words to a meetup organizer's ears than, hey, I have an idea for a presentation. So thanks again, everyone. And I will hit stop.
Thanks, Ethan.
Thanks for coming.